Hi, my name is Joe Basler. I'm Executive Director of Oregon AFSCME. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk tonight, and we're recording this tonight so that we can show it to other members. I think it's important to sort of get the word out about this important bit of legislation that we're working on. We're going to talk tonight about Senate Bill 916, and it's a bill in the Oregon legislature that would give striking workers unemployment insurance. So I just want to say strikes are hard. And one of the things we have learned from all the testimony, especially from the opposition about this bill, is people don't understand that. We understand that, but they are hard on members who risk the risks they have on going on strike. They are hard for their families and the amount of pressure and stress it puts on families, and they're hard for the community. But we have to be able to do hard things. Strikes are sometimes the only way we're ever going to get to do what we need to help our families, to help ourselves, and to help our communities. Um, you know, One of the things that we have found when we start talking about strikes or we have conversations is that preparing to go on strike, there is so much fear around not being able to pay your bills and the amount of financial hit you are going to be able to take and maybe not recover from. So many of our members are living, paycheck to paycheck, barely holding on, which is one of the reasons why they have to go on strike because of the wealth inequality that we are dealing with on a regular basis. And this sort of not the uncertainty of not knowing whether or not you are going to get a paycheck gives them pause before they take that step to go on strike and fight for their rights at work. Now I've been on the strike lines. I've seen so many members on strike lines. They're out there. Their families come. Their kids come. My kids have come. It's the fear though that we hear as each day goes forward is something that permeates that strike line. And it's good when you're out there, right? Everyone's sort of building each other's up, but when you go home, it settles in, and we have to sort of think about that and address that. Because going on strike isn't just a work decision; it's also an emotional decision. It comes with consequences that our employers, frankly, don't feel, and our employers count on that fear in us, and so that they can sort of drag this out. You have to go home and sort of discuss with your family why you might not be getting paid, and it causes pain in that household. And there is just this fundamental imbalance where management does not face that risk. Managers are still getting paid, and they know that they can wait you out and try to break the strike. We see this all the time. They delay, they delay, they delay. I think is here. Kim Harmon was one of our program directors. That we saw that we would go and when we were on strike in Benton County, they would just sit there and not move anything across the table for session after session. They'll cancel mediation. They will, have us sit there for hours, saying hours and hours into the night without any response or any conversation. Because the risk for a strike rests almost entirely on the worker and not the employer. So right now, this bill, why it's so important is it doesn't alleviate all the risk. It doesn't alleviate all the stress at all, but it helps sort of set the balance back. Because what it does is the bill allows those who are eligible for unemployment insurance to receive that if they go on strike. It only kicks in on the second week, but it's a huge safety net for workers who are fighting for their rights. It really forces employers also to come to the table. And I think even though the opposition won't believe this, it actually will resolve a lot more labor disputes a lot sooner than it would because the employers just can't wait you out if you know you're going to be getting unemployment insurance. And the other thing is that think about it from the employer standpoint, labor costs are already baked into their budgets, right? It's not like they're spending any extra money for you getting unemployment insurance. And also experts from the unemployment department testified that this bill will have almost no effect on unemployment rates for the rest of the state. Not something the employers liked at all. Of course, as I mentioned, this has not stopped every single business association, every single local government to come out of the woodwork and attack this bill. It is going to end democracy. It is an abomination, and it is the worst thing that has ever happened to the state of Oregon. And so we have got to push back. They have crazy theories about how the House strikes work. They don't understand how hard it is to get a group of folks together and to decide to take this sort of this huge risk. And so it's up to us to push back and make sure our voices are heard on this. Legislators need to hear from real people about this issue, and so that we can push back and really sort of educate them. Because there are a lot of lobbyists on the other side, but there are a lot more of us in the world. So our voices can carry a lot more weight. So we know that there are going to be questions, so we make sure you drop those in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. But before I also want to introduce Katie Tyson from the Oregon AFL-CIO. She's going to talk about a little bit where the bill is and how it's been going so far, and then we're going to have Susan Allen, one of Oregon AFSCME's political coordinators, talk about what we can do to help pass the bill. Katie, let me kick it to you.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Katie Tyson. I use she, her pronouns with the Oregon AFL-CIO. It's so great to see you all. I know many of you. Thanks for the invite. So happy to give an update on where we're at on this bill. First, just want to acknowledge and really send a big thank you. I think a lot of you have been plugged into this. I know your comms team, your political team has been really, really helpful. Joe testified in support of the bill. Sue testified in support of the bill. You've had members. So this really isn't possible without you all. So thank you for being here tonight and everything that you all continue to do. We're only halfway through. So Senate Bill 916, I think Joe just did an incredible job of kind of laying out the why here. You all can speak to the why in terms of why striking is so important better than anyone, I think. I think, to sum it up maybe in one sentence here, this is about, as Joe just said, slightly leveling the playing field, right? So that you all, when you've made the really hard decision to go out on strike, are not starved. And sometimes that is a literal starved into a contract that continues to perpetuate the ills of our society, right? Whether that's shitty wages, sorry, I guess I'm not in AFL, bad wages, bad working conditions, unsafe working conditions, right? All of the really good reasons that you all and workers across the state strike, right? We all know that you all aren't just doing this for fun and you don't want to work and not get paid, right? And I think, as Joe said, that is not an understanding that's shared among some legislators. So that's why we ran the bill, to really help level the playing field. I think, as some folks know too, unemployment insurance is only 40 to 60% of your wage replacement. So when we hear the opposition saying, people are going to be rich and happy on unemployment insurance, that's just not true, right? It is absolutely a stopgap measure. It's a social safety net network that was really intended to make sure that workers aren't forced into unsafe and unsuitable working conditions and jobs, which is absolutely in alignment with a strike, right? So we started the bill at the beginning of session, which started at the end of January. We've had 7 hearings, which is a little unheard of in the Senate Labor and Business Committee. 2 weeks ago, Thursday, we finally moved out of that committee. Probably, particularly how we're talking about it, not a surprise to anyone here. It was a party line vote. This will be a party line vote going forward too. And we're up for a floor vote really soon. During the course of those 7 hearings, we heard a lot from the opposition. I think Joe just talked about a lot of it in terms of the cost and how they're unhappy that it's actually not going to impact the trust very much, and from public sector employers in particular. So we heard, I think the big things that we heard from the opposition was a couple of things about definitions, a couple of things around how teachers are really different and how they negotiate, and they're able to negotiate back pay for their time out on strike. And so some concerns around that. When this would go into effect. So we initially had it go into effect immediately upon passage, which they typically just hate. And there was actual some logistical challenges there. And then we started this bill, as Joe said at the beginning, about the number of weeks, that you would only have to be out for a week to be eligible for unemployment insurance. And as Joe said, right, this is about UI eligibility. So if you're already eligible for UI, which is a whole laundry list, UI being unemployment insurance, then you would be eligible under this bill, right? So it's not making sure that you get benefits, right? It's not ensuring benefits. It's still an application that you have to go through. It's really about that eligibility piece. So as we talked to the opposition about those 4 concerns that they have that had the real goalposts that they set out at the beginning, we addressed all of those through amendments to the bill, so changes to the bill. So we addressed the pieces on back pay specific to teachers, really. We addressed some definitions, and the two really, really big concessions we made on the bill was the implementation date. So now the language is a January 1st, 2026 implementation date and a 2-week eligibility period. So you'd have to be on strike for longer than 2 weeks to be eligible. That is where we really didn't want to move, to be really frank with folks. 86% of strikes nationwide end before 2 weeks. And I want to be super clear that we will also be the first state to figure out how to make this possible for public sector workers. As you all probably know, we're one of 13 states where public sector workers across the board, by and large, are able to strike. That is pretty unique to Oregon. That is not something that a lot of states who have this already have. And so that, frankly, the public sector sort of outcry on this has been real. And I imagine a lot of you are public sector workers, so we'll talk about that more in a minute. But this will be a really important, frankly, model policy for the nation in terms of how we do this for public sector workers, because public sector workers can strike here and they should be able to strike here by and large, right? So we made all of those changes to the bill. And so we really felt like, the goalposts that were initially set by the opposition, we met. Probably doesn't surprise many of you. They are still opposed, even though we did that. So we're looking at a floor vote on Thursday. So the Senate, the whole body of the Senate will vote on the bill this Thursday. We anticipate that we're going to lose 2 Democrats on the bill. We now have a supermajority in the Senate because of a lot of the hard work that many of you all did over the election cycle. And so that we can still lose 2 Democrats and still have this bill pass. And we are quite disappointed, the folks that are going to vote against the bill. So feeling good about the floor vote. We still, I think, and we'll close this loop in a minute, but still need to keep a lot of pressure because a lot can happen in 2 days, tragically. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is, again, and probably a surprise to no one, and unfortunately, we at the AFL, and I think it asked me, absolutely don't believe that worker issues should be partisan. And unfortunately, what we run into time and time and again is that they are. And that is really unfortunate for a whole lot of reasons. But so on this bill, there will be a minority report. And essentially, that is the minority party's prerogative to, on the floor, offer an alternative version of the bill to be voted on. So in that minority report that will also be debated this Thursday is a whole lot of stuff. They really call out unions for donating to Democrats and some of the things that we've said in the walkouts in the past. There's some actual substantive changes in the bill. And then the big one that I wanted to be sure to highlight for you all is that it also guts public sector workers' ability to strike. That is obviously a really big deal for public sector workers, for union members in general, for workers, in terms of the solidarity and the rights that we lose when we give up something for one set of workers, right? So that's a really big deal. The outrage is pretty significant, but that will probably be the beginning conversation here is a conversation really quite unrelated to Senate Bill 916 on removing public sector's workers' right to strike. And that is a tactic from the minority party to probably get a lot of campaign commercials, frankly. So we're not concerned that minority report is going to move forward. This is kind of political theater at its core. And it's just going to take a lot of time. And it's going to be a lot of attacks on workers before we can get to the actual conversation about ending the ban on striking workers being eligible for unemployment insurance. So that's the overview of where we're at. Happy to answer questions after here, but as I said, I know that we really need to keep up the pressure. And I think just to really echo what Joe just said, legislators hear from us all the time. I cannot tell you all enough how sick they are of hearing from me. Like, I can't get a meeting anymore. Like, and they've heard the same thing. So can't emphasize enough, like, hearing from actual workers, as if I'm not an actual worker, but actual workers who have made the really hard decision to strike or could make the really hard decision to strike, and what 40 to 60% wage replacement would mean to you and your coworkers during that time is absolutely what moves people. And particularly for the folks who are our no's and who are squishy on this vote, like that is what's going to move them, if anything. So I will hand it back over, but happy to answer questions on the bill in a minute.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate, and we've worked in such good partnership with the AFL on this bill. It's been great. There's so many legislators and there's so few of us, so it's been so helpful to sort of like tag team this work, and it's been huge. But I just want to now I want to introduce Susan Allen, political coordinator for Oregon AFSCME. She's been working on this with our members and policymakers to get it passed. Susan, can you talk to the members about what we can do to help get this done?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I would love to. So here's the thing. When things get really tight in the Capitol, legislators start looking glassy-eyed and getting swayed from side to side. And so it's really important that they talk to real people who have real stories that cut through all of the white noise, the corporate speak, the fact that we are outnumbered in the Capitol like 10-1 on this issue. So your voice matters. It matters because you will be in the districts of the senators who are voting. So at the end of the day, this is a community issue. This is a family issue. This is an issue that will matter in real time for families, working families across the state. So what we are asking you to do is take a moment to, Katie's going to drop into the chat the action toolkit that the AFL has created. And if you click that hyperlink, then it will direct you specifically based on your address to your senator. So your senator will hear from you. And you might think, well, I live in Portland. I'm sure they're going to be all shored up. No, do not take that for granted at all. As a matter of fact, I had conversations with legislators today who were in districts that you would think are very democratic, and perhaps they've been very good on labor issues in the past. But this is a very tough discussion. This is a discussion where they have to really show up and understand, bridge the gap between their understanding, the general public's understanding of what happens on a strike line and what it actually feels like to be a striking worker, what it feels like to step onto that strike line with your kids needing food in the refrigerator, with heat needing to be on or air conditioning needing to be on in your house, to be able to pay your mortgage while you're fighting for better working conditions, better pay, and a stronger contract. That's hard. That's scary. And how you convey that to legislators will matter. So, as Katie said, we've seen flip-flopping from, or I would say wobbling, not flip-flopping, but wobbling of legislators. And what you can do is empower them, just like we empower each other as members of the union. So do click that chat, do take a moment to call, and it will make a difference. This is a place where you can make a difference to lead the nation for workers in a time when it's rough, let's be clear. So that is the AFL Action Toolkit. We will also be available. Like Katie, I can also answer questions for you when we get done with this. And Joe, I want to hand it back over to you.
Great. Yeah, I think that's mostly all we wanted to say. I don't want to keep you forever, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them of either Katie or Sarah, Sue or me. All right. Oh, yeah, Mark.
Yeah, how is this bill going to be applying to workers that have full-time employment status but a part-time appointment as like a student? So this would be like grad students for OHSU, for U of O, CGE represented employees out in university or Oregon State University, and then also the student workers that just recently organized.
it'll depend on whether or not, and Katie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it'll depend if they're eligible for unemployment insurance currently. So it doesn't change the rules around unemployment insurance. All it does is it only gives striking workers access to that benefit. So if it also, just a flag, if someone had just gotten hired and they're not yet eligible for unemployment insurance and won't work, it won't work. So I think Mark, I think we'd have to look and see how what their current eligibility status is. So hopefully, then Katie was nodding, so I think that's the right answer.
Yeah,
I think
that's
I would
super
just
helpful.
I would just lift up that the calculus that it takes for a worker to receive UI is different for every worker because we all have different job histories. So what you might think might be a very bright line is actually very specific and unique to each worker. So I would just really lift that up.
Lee, go for it.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to be clear. Are you asking us to do both the email and the phone call alerts, or one or the other?
I think either one. If you want to do both, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Anyone else have a question? Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Half hour. That's great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. And like I said, we're going to record this and share it around with other members too.
Thank you all. Go
Thanks.
Team Ask Me.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.